My name is Tom. Shannon and I tied the knot 7 years ago, but recently, our relationship has hit rocky waters. Despite my best efforts, a sense of dissatisfaction has been lingering, gradually growing stronger. This feeling has been with me for about 6 weeks now. Before an unexpected photograph caught my attention, the tension between Shannon and me has been escalating, especially in the past few days, and I can't help but suspect her sister Amanda's involvement. Shortly after receiving the photo, I found myself tasked with a challenging project outside the city. Pretty University was facing a critical issue with their main refrigeration unit, and despite the team's collective efforts, a solution remained elusive. As a dedicated engineer from the esteemed Fraser HVAC company, I am one of 2 experts entrusted with resolving such emergencies. Thankfully, it was my turn for duty that week. On Tuesday, I embarked on a 4-hour journey to West Lafayette, where I remained until Thursday. Finally, around 9 p.m., we successfully resolved the problem. Exhausted, I decided to grab dinner at a nearby establishment on the university's premises. By around 10 p.m., I retired to my hotel room, quickly sending Shannon a message informing her of my bedtime and that we would continue testing the system the next morning. I also mentioned our plans for a dinner date on Friday. After a refreshing shower, I prepared for bed while ESPN quietly played in the background. To my surprise, I received a message from my colleague Roland Bruton, accompanied by an apologetic tone and a photograph taken earlier that evening at Casa del. Roland suggested we discuss the contents of the image. The picture revealed my beloved wife Shannon sitting at a cozy restaurant table, leaning intimately against Bart Chesterton, a colleague from the OSU library. I had never held Bart in high regard, considering him peculiar, but the notion of him being connected to my wife had never crossed my mind. Despite our recent strain, the idea of Shannon betraying me with another man felt inconceivable. Realizing that inaction would only fuel my growing fury, I turned off the TV and contacted Roland. I apologized for disrupting his Thursday night, pausing to gather my thoughts. I explained that Emily, a close friend, and I had an early dinner, and while finishing up, we noticed Shannon and Bart on the other side of the restaurant. Emily had recognized Shannon and asked me about it. Intrigued, I observed them for a while, taking photographs. Thankfully, they did not engage in any affectionate gestures, such as kissing. They appeared engrossed in conversation, mirroring the scene captured in the photograph. A momentary regret tinged Roland's voice as he sighed. He sincerely apologized while I asked about their departure and whether they had left together. Roland recounted that they had waited in their car in the parking lot for a brief period, but Shannon and Bart never emerged. Eventually, they decided to depart and sent me a photo as evidence. Roland regretted not waiting longer, as it seemed they had just received their drinks and were yet to begin their meal, indicating a significant wait. An uneasy silence followed, leaving us both perplexed and sure how to proceed. Eventually, Roland spoke, expressing his newfound understanding. He shared that Emily, his friend, wanted to extend her warm regards. Emily was deeply upset with Shannon, and I empathized with her emotions, though the full impact had not yet hit me. I asked about the Purdue job, inquiring when I could return home. Roland shared the necessary details and confirmed that once we conducted the morning test, I would embark on a 4-hour journey back. It would provide ample time for me to calm down and discourage impulsive actions. I responded with an appreciative smile, reassured that Roland understood I would never resort to violence against Shannon. Roland mentioned that he and Emily had been discussing something. Though it might be premature to broach the topic, he offered a place to stay overnight, saying they had a guest room ready for me if needed. Grateful, I conveyed my thanks to Roland, genuinely appreciating the gesture. Though uncertain of my next move, I promised to consider his offer. After a few more minutes of quiet conversation, I ended our chat. I switched off the light, settled into bed, and promptly drifted into slumber. After all, no marriage is without its flaws, right? Despite our shortcomings, I genuinely loved Shannon and did everything to make her happy for 7 years, including 3 years of dating. Of the 4 couples who got married, we faced constant problems. According to my observations, the main problems were related to money and intimacy. Fortunately, we had no problems in these areas. Neither of us was a wasteful consumer, and our personal connection remained as important to both of us as it had been in the first months of our relationship. Although things became more routine, Shannon and I still craved each other equally. You know, for us, the problems are not related to finances or intimacy, but to Amanda. She was 36, about 4 years older than Shannon and me, her husband, Alex, was no better. He was a vain lawyer who saw himself as superior. But at least I didn't have to endure his presence so often. Shannon has always admired her older sister Amanda, a frequent visitor to our house, who constantly gave unsolicited advice on how to live our lives. Shannon suggested that it would be more sensible to store the dishes in one place and move the spices to another. She commented on whether I still use a gas grill, arguing that charcoal enhances the taste of meat better. She also expressed her opinion about the disgusting green chair, describing it as a typical original chair in a trailer. That's how she felt about it in general. It deeply saddened me that Shannon couldn't resist asking her to leave. The most frustrating part, without listing a detailed list of Amanda's other misdeeds, was that she constantly humiliated me behind my back. If I was in the room, she was overly kind, endlessly praising me for being kind to Shannon, caring, for being so helpful around the house, while poor Alex, according to her, couldn't even change a light bulb. After hearing her speak negatively about me several times when she thought I wasn't around. One day when Shannon and she were having coffee in the kitchen, I quietly entered through the back door after a jog. She told Shannon that she adored her, but she had to admit that I, Tom, could be naughty sometimes. She expressed her opinion that I don't have the same attractiveness as Christopher or even Tom. And despite my college education, she doubted why I work with my hands. In her opinion, Shannon could have chosen someone much better. I couldn't understand her mindset, especially considering that we had been married for almost 2 years by that point. It was unpleasant to hear Amanda talking about Shannon's ex-boyfriends. Later, she asked if I was serious about children and sounded upset. Literally 5 minutes later, she appeared in front of me with a smile and mentioned that she and Shannon had just talked about what a wonderful husband she had. I couldn't believe it. Shannon and I have argued about this more than once, and although she reassured me, she never took action to solve the problem. She mentioned that Amanda wasn't that bad and even liked me, but I brushed her words off. I expressed my emotions by exclaiming how I can't stand it when Amanda says that. We definitely won't have children. Overcome with emotion, I paced up and down the bedroom, overcome with anger and frustration. It seemed to me terribly that I was losing my mind. My wife tried to calm me down by saying that she was just expressing her displeasure and that she loved me despite her tendency to cause quarrels. But this fight was one of the worst in our lives. I couldn't control my emotions, and after saying a few rude words, I ran out of the house. I was away for 6 long hours, seeking solace from my friend Raphael, the bartender at Bob's restaurant. Mostly I just sat there, trying to clear my head of everything that was going on. When I returned home at midnight, I found her sleeping in our bed, turned away from me. The atmosphere was tense, and our conversation was limited to a simple exchange of morning wishes and a request for more coffee. Within a few days, the situation began to improve and become warmer, but it was never fully resolved. It was clear that Shannon loved me, but I couldn't understand why she didn't take my side and ask her sister to stop humiliating me. The only way out for me was to avoid Amanda as much as possible, making excuses so that I would not be at home when she came. Besides, I tried to minimize conversations about her with Shannon. The weeks leading up to my trip to West Lafayette were particularly stressful. Strangely, Amanda was in the house more often than ever before. Almost every day, when I came home from work, he and Shannon would have an important conversation in the kitchen. Perhaps because of this or another reason, Shannon began to treat me colder and more distant. She realized that it was not worth mentioning her sister in my presence, leaving me in the dark about what was going on with Amanda. But apparently Shannon still distanced herself from me. Although our communication remained polite, but who needs simple politeness with his wife? She became cautious around me, and our closeness decreased noticeably. Recently, Shannon and I have been distant from each other for several weeks, exchanging only the usual hugs. Due to the strange atmosphere, it was challenging for me to approach her, and I was on the verge of giving up. Our private relationships also became routine, with only a few occurrences in the past month. Though not great at deep conversations, I did try once or twice. I asked Shannon if something was bothering her, if we needed to have a serious conversation. I wanted to solve our problems, but she said it was okay. She mentioned concerns about changes at work and minor issues with Amanda, but nothing requiring special attention. I appreciate your concern, dear. A forced grin and a peck on the cheek, that's all I got in response. This behavior continued for quite a long time, and I decided to have a long conversation with Aunt Gwen. Aunt Gwen, my mother's younger sister, played a significant role in my upbringing after my father's pass away, and my mother's subsequent illness. Although she now lives in Seattle, we often talked on the phone. If anyone could help me understand Shannon's behavior, it was undoubtedly Gwen. When I returned from Purdue, I decided to call her over the weekend. After Roland sent the photo, I made a deliberate effort to set aside the confusion and focus on my work. On Friday morning, my main goal was to test the system's capabilities, ensure it handled the load, and quickly move on. By about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we had successfully completed all necessary checks. As a thank you gesture, the Purdue team invited me to a quick lunch, and then I headed home. During the 200-mile journey, my mind was filled with numerous puzzling questions. Had they already been private, or was it just a possibility? Did my actions contribute to this situation? I also wondered if Shannon's feelings for him were genuine or just a passing fling. Could I find the strength to forgive what happened, or was our relationship beyond repair? And did Amanda play a role in this? Did she encourage her sister's actions, maybe? Approaching Columbus in chaotic Friday traffic, I didn't have a clear answer, but I know I wasn't ready to face her at home. After considering Roland's generous offer of his guest room, I ultimately chose a modest room at Motel 6, had a hearty steak and beer at Outback, and spent another night alone. With a sense of satisfaction, I sent Shannon the least affectionate message possible. I'm almost done, and I have to go home tomorrow. No sweet words or emojis, just the essential information for her to know I was alive, she replied. Okay honey, I miss you. Yes, that's correct. Around 9:30, I drove back to our street, slowly past our house, checking for unfamiliar cars nearby. Nothing seemed unusual. The house was dark, except for our bedroom, where the curtains suggested the TV was on. Disappointed, I returned to Motel 6 and went to bed. When I returned to the house shortly before noon, there was no rush. I felt a wave of emptiness and indifference. If earlier I was consumed by anger and vindictive thoughts, now I longed for resolution. I needed to find out the truth, assess the consequences of this ordeal, and confront them face to face. Shannon's absence and the eerie silence in the house only intensified my emotions. Entering the house through a side door, I went upstairs to freshen up and organize my things. Then, I went down to the kitchen to make a sandwich. My gaze involuntarily shifted to the front door. I stood paralyzed. A large suitcase stood untouched at the entrance. Approaching it, I felt its weight, indicating it was full. Time seemed to slip away, and I couldn't figure out how long I'd been fixated on it. The silence was broken by the sound of a side door opening. Shannon came in, greeting me softly. Hello, baby? With an unusual half-smile, she hugged me warmly, more like a grandmother than a passionate embrace between spouses. After a week apart, I couldn't take my eyes off her. I wasn't planning to raise my voice or create a scene. I just wanted to understand the situation. She led me back to the kitchen, holding my hand, and we sat at the table across from each other expressing concern. She mentioned that I must be tired and asked if I had eaten. She inquired if she could cook me lunch and asked what I wanted. I reassured her, saying I was fine, and focused on her face, leaning closer. She conveyed seriously that she needed to talk to me, expressing urgency. She apologized and watched me patiently, waiting for a response, but I remained silent. Eventually, she inquired if she could ask me something and requested that I remain calm and refrain from anger. She wanted to tell the whole story before hearing my thoughts and acknowledged that she was asking a lot. I nodded in agreement, and all I wanted was for the situation to be resolved. She took a deep breath and began talking about Amanda. To my surprise, anger suddenly surged within me. I expressed my frustration, asking, "What does this rude woman have to do with it?" Shannon pleaded, her face filled with panic, and she begged me to listen. I noticed that my fists were tightly clenched, and I was holding my breath. After rising from my seat, pacing around the kitchen and settling back down, I took a deep breath, attempting to compose myself. In due course, I responded, "Okay, go ahead. I promised to listen, so I will." I couldn't help but speculate on how the conversation might shift if she began discussing her sister. It hinted at the possibility of enduring a more extended discussion. After giving me a cautious glance, she began again, explaining that she had been spending a lot of time with Amanda lately. She hoped I could understand how it was affecting her and creating tension. She mentioned that things had taken a turn for the worse between Alex and Amanda, and she suspected him of betrayal. About a month ago, Amanda found him with one of his assistants on the office table, and Shannon witnessed the unfolding scene, feeling a strong sense of sympathy for Amanda. It goes without saying that it was an incredibly tough time for her. Amanda experienced deep heartache and anger, unsure how to handle the situation. Alex constantly apologized, expressed a desire to reconcile, and promised to do everything possible, including seeking counseling to improve their relationship. But everything changed on Tuesday. Feeling depressed, Amanda decided to take a break to calm down and then requested Alex to leave. Impressed, Amanda decided to take a break to calm down and then requested Alex to leave, expressing her desire for a divorce. Unfortunately, he resorted to physical force, leading to her hospitalization. On Tuesday evening, she endured a concussion. In that moment, my own marital struggles briefly faded from my mind. I conveyed sympathy, stating, "I'm sorry, Shannon. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." She lowered herself, took my hand, and conveyed gratitude, remarking, "Thank you, dear. I understand that you don't like her, and that means a lot to me. Now comes the toughest part." She paused and explained that Amanda would be discharged from the hospital on Monday but had nowhere to go. Alex is acting extremely difficult and refuses to leave the house. She wanted to offer her our guest room where she can stay. Most likely she'll have to take sick leave and work part-time for a couple of weeks. She wanted to be close to her and take care of her. She hurriedly explained, "I know you don't like her and you don't want to be around her, but she has no one else to turn to. Please, Tom. Her life is falling apart and I am her only sister." "Shannon, you're right. She's not the kind of person I particularly enjoy being around, but it doesn't matter now. Of course, she can stay with us. Did you really think I would refuse?" She got up excitedly, circled the table, and settled on my lap, wrapping her arms around me. Excitedly, circled the table, and settled on my lap, wrapping her arms around me. When I looked into her eyes, pure joy radiated from her face. Expressing her gratitude, she whispered, "Thank you, my love." Her lips met mine in a gentle kiss, assuring me that everything would be fine. She vowed to protect me and ensure we saw each other less often. With utmost sincerity, she promised never to let her sister belittle me again. Never again. The happiness emanating from her overwhelmed me, and I couldn't resist hugging her tighter. As I put my head on her shoulder, tears welled up for a moment, and I composed myself. Carefully, I moved her from my lap to a nearby chair. I went to the sink, poured a glass of water, unable to endure the anticipation any longer. "Okay, Shannon, can we just finish this? Let's get this over with. Whatever it is," I pleaded. She looked at me with confusion, and I couldn't help but express my disappointment. "Honestly, you can't even be honest with me," I said. "Dear, I sincerely don't understand what you're talking about. What is the rest?" she asked, disappointed. I picked up my phone, scrolled through the messages until I found the photo Roland had sent me and shoved it in her face. "This Shannon, you and this man," I said to her face. The revelation left her speechless. I was momentarily puzzled by the sight of her suitcase at the front door. How could she leave when she was helping her sister move in with us? Before I could finish, she said, "Oh Tom, this is incredibly sad. Carrie, his wife, has a recurrence of breast cancer and their 2-year-old twins are in the center of events. He is absolutely terrified and my heart is bursting with grief." I stared at her, suddenly grasping the importance of the photo where she was with a man. "Yes, we had dinner. He really needed someone to talk to. Her prognosis is uncertain right now." She held my gaze for a moment, conveying a deeper meaning. "Did you genuinely believe it? Oh my God. Did you think it was a romantic dinner? That's how it appears, right?" I couldn't even control the tone of my voice. "Roland and Emily Bruton certainly thought so. They are ready to meet you face to face." Before I could say anything or take any action, she hugged me tightly. "Tom, you are the only man I have loved or even considered in the last 7 years. Bart is just a friend whose wife is suffering from a terminal illness. I offered him emotional support when he needed it. It became harder and harder for me to breathe, not just because she refused to let me go. Additionally, I couldn't help but notice tension in our environment over the past few weeks. We lacked communication. Physical closeness was scarce. I was consumed with worry about Amanda, my love, and I couldn't trust you with this. The mere mention of her name disgusts you, so I carried this burden alone, which led to distance. I apologize for being so distant. My thoughts were exclusively focused on Amanda and the vile actions committed against her." "Okay, I guess I can understand that," but the suitcase caught my attention. It was standing, fully packed at the front door. As I looked at it, she gently pulled my head down and kissed me on the lips with a long, sincere kiss and then met my tear-stained eyes. It was obvious that something had happened. I decided to go to Amanda and Alex's house and gathered clothes, so that she would have everything she needed for the coming weeks. "Baby, I'm very sorry about the misunderstanding that happened." She apologized with regret in her voice. "I'm very sorry about this misunderstanding," I said regretfully. "You've had this photo since Thursday, and I can imagine how you suffered. My love, I'm very sorry." Without letting go of my hand, she gently pulled me towards the stairs. Her urgency left no room for delay. We had to solve something extremely important urgently. In the private atmosphere of the bedroom, we gently took off our clothes, hugged, exchanged tender kisses, and shed tears of love. We hugged each other tightly, fervently, and passionately, making tender love completely immersed in the presence of my soulmate. While lying in bed, our hands explored each other's bodies as we engaged in intermittent conversations. I asked, "Really?" And she responded, "Yes, really." Her voice filled with affectionate tenderness and playful teasing. She continued, "I really saw his wife. And did you really think that I was cheating on you?" Our friends Roy and Emily had the same thought. Although I despise the fact that his wife has cancer, it made me think about the state of my own marriage. I confessed, I thought it was over. And she expressed her concern saying, "I believe that one cheater in the family is more than enough, poor Amanda." As an epilogue to our conversation, it dawned on me, I'll be damned if it hasn't stopped completely. Amanda, I must say, she looked completely different, which is not so surprising considering what she had recently been through. At the same time, she expressed great gratitude for being in our house and constantly praised Shannon for becoming her husband. She apologized to me countless times, admitting that she had completely misjudged me. In the end, I insisted that everything was fine and she could stop apologizing. But she still tried to help, even taking on some of the responsibilities of cooking and housework. When she began to feel better, after she managed to find a fierce and determined lawyer, she finally got the opportunity to gain some financial stability and secure a nice apartment for herself during the chaotic divorce process. Despite the circumstances, he and Shannon continued to spend time together, but it was very nice to have the house at their disposal again. It was a calm and restorative period, almost reminiscent of a second honeymoon. We both acutely realized the value of our relationship and the depth of our affection. Watching a marriage break up turning into a destructive mess served as a visual reminder to us that we need to cherish and appreciate our own marriage. There are noticeably more smiles at home. Only 4 months later, we received the joyful news about the recovery of Bart's wife. Despite the fact that Bart continues to be eccentric, I am sincerely happy for their positive outcome.